John 17 contains what is often referred to as the high priestly prayer of Jesus, where Jesus prays for his disciples and for all believers in the world. One of the recurring themes within this prayer is that we would be one as the Father and the Son and the Spirit are one, and that the life of God would be in us and our lives would be in God, and that we would be unified within and for each other by the love of God. So it's this profound intercession for the union of God's people with each other and with God. Now, that is a lofty prayer, and I believe that one day it shall be answered, and answered fully, but we're not there yet. In a sense, we are progressing towards that very imperfectly. And one of the most recent iterations of a hurdle for the church is not only the pandemic, but in particular the vaccine, which is a response, a scientific response to the pandemic. And it has emerged within the church that the vaccine itself is now a problem. I've had some really interesting and somewhat unsettling conversations recently with Christian leaders and with some pastors who are lamenting the fact that the vaccine itself has become such a divisive issue within the church. People who are getting the vaccine, who are furious at people who are not getting the vaccine, and people who are not getting the vaccine who see those who are getting the vaccine as somehow selling out or not taking their faith seriously or not even being Christians or in some way selling their soul to the government or even worse. So, what do we say about this? So there's so much going on here. There is a political dimension, a scientific dimension, a medical dimension, an ethical issue. There's an ideological issue, worldviews. But the primary moment I want to take right now is to think about this theologically. To think about the vaccine, or taking the vaccine, theologically. The shape of the gospel is Christ-centered. And right at the center of the gospel, right at the center of the new covenant, is the person of Jesus. And what does Jesus do? He literally lays himself down. He gives himself away. He pours himself out on behalf of the others, on behalf of us, on behalf of the rest of the world. So the shape of the gospel is the laying down of the individual life of Christ in order to benefit the whole society, the whole world. And another dimension to the gospel is that those of us who respond to God, who say yes to this beautiful gift given to us in the new covenant work of Christ, are then obligated to live similarly within the world, and most particularly to live toward the vulnerable, the marginalized, in scripture often called the widow and the orphan. Who are the ones in the society who are most likely to be picked on, most likely to be ignored, most likely to be exploited? It is the church's role to identify them and to rally to their cause, to gather them in and to defend them and to resource them and to bless them and love them. Okay. So the gospel is Christ-centered and Christ-shaped, self-giving on behalf of the other, and is also deeply oriented towards the margins and the vulnerable and the marginalized. So let's apply that right now in the science of the vaccine. It seems to me that taking the vaccine is actually a deeply Christian thing to do. Why? Because even although I don't like the fact there's a pandemic, and even although I don't really like getting an injection with medicine that I don't fully understand, I'm not really just doing it for myself. In fact, I might think to myself, I'm really healthy, I'm in a minimal risk group, so why should I do it? Well, the reason it seems to me that I should do it is not even primarily for myself, but for others. Because if me getting a vaccine mitigates the risk at all for the others, then I'm doing the right thing. And most particularly if it mitigates the risk for those who are most vulnerable, the seniors, the frail, those with pre-existing medical conditions, the immunocompromised, those living in poverty, those living on the streets, those living in difficult circumstances where they don't have the resources that many of us enjoy, if my action benefits them, even indirectly, because it makes the society as a whole a safer place because there is less room for the virus to move, then I'm doing the right thing. I'm actually doing the Christian thing, because I'm putting the needs and the benefit of others before myself, which is exactly the shape of the gospel. Jesus did that. He put the benefit and the need and the well-being of others before his own life. In fact, we know the story. He fully and comprehensively laid himself down on behalf of the rest of us and gave that very action as an example for us to follow. And as awkward and as unpopular perhaps in some corners as it may be, I see the role of the church at this moment in history is to rush to the front of the queue and say, if taking this benefits the others, and if taking this vaccine puts other people in a more likely place to be protected and have well-being and be in a safer place, then it's my duty to do that. Now, I know for some people this is a really hot topic and it's not that straightforward, but for me theologically it is that straightforward, and there's many other dimensions to it, and some of them I may get into in the weeks ahead, but for now I think that's the shape of what it looks like to live Christianly in this moment in history. Now, I understand that for some folks there's an element of fear that if we do this, what if we are accidentally giving in to the system that is somehow at work behind the scenes and maybe somehow mentioned and buried in the pages of Revelation somewhere, and we're giving ourselves away as a church, we are compromising. Well, I think that fear is misguided. Revelation is a book which starts out with the greeting, grace and peace. And so everything within it is to call us into a deeper place of grace and a stronger sense of peace. And so I don't see this moment in history where the church has an opportunity to serve its community and serve each other and extend love towards each other as a moment of fear. I see it as a moment of grace and peace. I also see it as a moment when we can, in a clumsy kind of way, answer a little bit more the prayer in John 17 that Jesus asks the Father for, which is the union of his people, where we come together, laying down our own rights, laying down our own priorities and our own ambitions for the blessing and the benefit of others, especially those who are most vulnerable and marginalized. That's just the way I see this.